Before we begin, take a breath. This isn't just a podcast. It's a new way to think, speak, and live in English. Welcome to Confluent Podcast, where words flow, confidence grows, and every sip brings you closer to fluency.
That's right. And if you have ever frozen mid-sentence because you were desperately trying to remember, like, the past participle of a verb, you're in the right place.
Oh, totally. Or if you feel like you've spent literally years memorizing grammar rules, only to completely blank out the second a native speaker says hello, I mean, you are not alone, and it is not your fault.
It's really not. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Today, we are unpacking a method that completely ditches the boring textbooks, the stuffy classrooms, and those endless grammar drills.
Goodness. So what exactly are we looking at today?
Well, we've got some incredibly fascinating source material. We're looking at audio transcripts straight from the creator of this highly intuitive language learning method.
Right, along with some insights pulled from their exclusive VIP learner program, right?
Exactly. These sources cover advice that was given to learners all over the world during this massive global speaking challenge.
Our mission today is to extract the core philosophies of this intuitive method and, give you actionable, real-world steps to stop translating in your head.
Yeah, so you can actually start speaking effortlessly. And crucially, we're going to look at the why, like the actual neurology and psychology behind why traditional methods fail.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to start with the biggest sacred cow of language learning, which is grammar rules.
Oh, the grammar rules, yeah.
The creator of this method argues that traditional grammar rules simply do not work for real-time speaking. And the reason comes down to one really simple factor: speed.
Right, because real human conversation is just incredibly fast. You cannot possibly remember, let alone apply these complex grammar formulas while you are actively trying to communicate a thought.
No, it's impossible. Trying to recall a grammar rule in the middle of a live conversation is like trying to read a manual on how to ride a bike while you're already pedaling down a steep hill.
That is a terrifying image.
Right, you're like looking down at page 42 to figure out how the caliper brakes are supposed to grip the wheel, but there's a massive oak tree rapidly approaching your face. You are absolutely going to crash.
What's fascinating here is the underlying brain science of why that crash is completely inevitable. It's just how we're wired.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, when you are sitting in a classroom analyzing grammar, memorizing conjugation tables or whatever, you are heavily utilizing the analytical center of your brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, the prefrontal cortex. Got it.
And that area of the brain is fantastic for solving math equations or working through a logic puzzle, but it is notoriously painfully slow.
So it just can't keep up with the pace of a normal chat.
Exactly. To achieve flow in a language, your brain has to bypass that analytical center completely. The goal of language isn't to solve a sentence like a math equation.
Right. It's to internalize it so deeply that it bypasses the prefrontal cortex altogether. It needs to live in the automated, subconscious parts of your brain.
Yes, and that's why the method we are looking at emphasizes developing a, quote, feeling for correctness.
A feeling for correctness. I love that. Like, you don't know the academic name of the tense you just used, you just know it sounds right.
Right. The same way you know a song's being played out of key without needing a degree in music theory,
That makes so much sense. But I'm looking at the source material, and I'm wondering about the actual mechanics of how we get there.
The practical application.
Yeah. The creator talks about abandoning grammar drills in favor of what they call mini stories and point of view stories. But what does that actually mean in practice? How does hearing a story replace a textbook?
Well, it's an incredibly clever hack for the human brain. Let's look at the point of view, or POV story specifically.
Okay.
A POV story involves taking a very simple, engaging narrative, maybe a story about a dog stealing a piece of pizza,
Great example.
and you tell it from different perspectives, and most importantly, different time frames. So first, you might listen to the story told entirely in the present tense.
Like, the dog sees the pizza, the dog runs.
Exactly. You listen to that until you understand the narrative perfectly. Then, you listen to the exact same story, but the narrator starts with 10 years ago.
Oh, wow. So now everything is shifted into the past tense. The dog saw the pizza, the dog ran.
Yep. And because your brain is already familiar with the meaning and the characters, you aren't struggling to understand the plot anymore.
So your brain can just relax and notice the changes in the sounds.
Precisely. You don't get a worksheet asking you to circle the past tense verbs. You simply absorb the temporal shifts intuitively.
Because the narrative's engaging, so your brain just stops listening to the grammar and starts focusing on the story itself.
Exactly. You are subconsciously absorbing the structural shifts without ever invoking that slow, analytical prefrontal cortex we talked about earlier.
You are learning the rules of the game simply by playing it over and over again until the moves just become second nature.
That's exactly it.
I am I'm struggling to square this with my own experience though, because if we aren't studying grammar rules and taking quizzes, how do we actually internalize enough of the language to have a conversation?
Right, the output side of things.
Yeah, I mean, every language teacher I have ever had told me that practice makes perfect and that I need to force myself to speak from day one. Get out there, make mistakes, talk to strangers.
Oh, yeah, the classic immerse yourself immediately advice.
Right. But the creator in these transcripts advises the exact opposite. They
Yeah.
say that if you are at an intermediate level or lower, you should absolutely not stress about speaking yet. They are telling learners to wait.
I know, it sounds crazy.
Isn't waiting just a form of procrastination?
It definitely feels counterintuitive based on traditional schooling, which, demands immediate output and punishes silence. But psychologically and neurologically, delaying speaking is incredibly sound advice.
Really?
Yeah, the creator is advocating for a silent period. You need to bathe the brain in the language first. We are talking about massive passive input.
How massive are we talking here?
The sources suggest 4, 5, or even 6 hours a day of purely listening.
Wow. 6 hours a day just listening.
By doing this, you are building a massive subconscious reservoir of vocabulary, phrasing, and natural rhythm. When you force output too early, when that reservoir is still mostly empty, you trigger massive anxiety.
Oh, because you are frantically searching for words that aren't securely in there yet.
Exactly. And anxiety is the absolute enemy of language acquisition. It activates the self-monitoring, highly critical part of your brain that makes you stumble and freeze.
So by delaying the speaking phase until you are naturally motivated, until you feel an undeniable urge to speak, you completely remove the stress of immediate performance.
Yes, you allow the language to soak into the foundational layers of your memory.
The practicality of this is what really stands out in the transcripts for me. The source specifically mentions using your extra time at home or during your commute.
Which is brilliant!
Because, let's be honest, nobody has 6 hours a day to sit at a desk staring at an English textbook.
Right, nobody.
But you do have 6 hours of passive time. You listen to these audio stories while you were cooking dinner, while you were walking the dog, while you were sitting on the bus or the train.
You are getting these massive repetitions of audio lessons in the margins of your daily life.
Which means if you are listening to this very deep dive right now while you are doing the dishes or driving to work, you are actively doing the work. You are building that reservoir.
It entirely validates the time you spend simply consuming content. You aren't being lazy by not speaking. You are in the crucial absorption phase.
I love that framing.
The transcripts make a powerful point, too. You should only jump into a formal speaking challenge when you feel highly motivated and naturally ready.
The language should feel like a cup of coffee that is being poured so full it naturally spills over the brim rather than you having to drop a bucket down a dry well and desperately crank it to the surface.
That's a perfect analogy.
But here is the friction point. Once that subconscious reservoir is incredibly full and the coffee is ready to spill over, how do you actually get it out of your mouth without sounding robotic?
Right, because understanding a language and physically producing the sounds are two very different skill sets.
Exactly. The source material presents two completely different avenues for practicing output: shadowing and conversation. Let's dive into the mechanics of those, starting with shadowing.
Well, shadowing is a highly active, almost physical exercise. It involves listening to a piece of audio and imitating the speaker exactly, almost simultaneously.
So you are a shadow of their voice, speaking just a fraction of a second behind them.
Yes. The creator notes this is an optional technique, but it is phenomenal for advanced learners who want to master pronunciation and, more importantly, intonation.
The intonation aspect is fascinating. The transcripts emphasize that the music of the language, the up, down, and natural rhythm of speech is far more important than worrying about pronouncing every single individual sound flawlessly.
It is so much more important.
Because as a learner, you can spend hours stressing over the exact placement of your tongue to get the perfect American R sound or the exact British vowel shape. But the sources suggest that is entirely the wrong focus.
It is the wrong focus because intonation carries the actual framework of meaning and emotion.
Right, like how the pitch of your voice rises at the end of a sentence to indicate a question.
Or how you stress a specific word to show sarcasm or urgency. If that musical framework is solid, a few minor phonetic errors will not disrupt communication at all. The listener's brain will automatically fill in the gaps.
Oh, that is so relieving to hear.
In fact, the transcripts explicitly state that mixing American, British, or Australian accents is totally fine. As long as your rhythm and clarity are good, the specific geographical flavor of your vowels does not matter to a native speaker.
So what does this all mean for the learner's daily practice? To bring in an analogy, it seems like shadowing is like sitting in your room playing a piece of complex sheet music perfectly by yourself.
I like where you're going with this.
You are working on your form, your breath control, your muscle memory. It is highly technical and controlled. But conversation, that second avenue the source mentions, that is stepping out of your room and joining a live jazz jam session.
That is a perfect way to conceptualize it.
In a live jazz session, it is inherently messy. You don't know exactly what notes the other person's going to play next. You can't control the tempo perfectly, and you have to listen and respond entirely in the moment.
Exactly. And the source material talks about talking to real people globally, using video calls or language apps. And the secret they highlight is to focus entirely on the relationship.
Not the grammar.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the reason the jazz jam session of real conversation is so brutally effective is because it acts as a massive psychological distraction.
A distraction from what?
From your own anxiety. When you are alone trying to speak, your primary goal is often, I need to construct a grammatically perfect sentence in English. That activates the slow, anxious prefrontal cortex.
But when you are face to face with another human being, your primary goal shifts. It becomes, I want to get to know this incredibly interesting person from across the world.
Exactly. You bypass that self-monitoring part of your brain entirely. The genuine human desire to connect overrides the fear of making a mistake. The language is literally pulled out of you by your curiosity about the other person.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because even with all this brilliant practice, even if you've done the massive input, you've shadowed the audio, and you're stepping into those live conversations, learners still hit massive mental roadblocks.
Constantly.
The source material identifies two major psychological hurdles: the agonizing habit of translating in your head before you speak, and the crippling fear of judgment, dealing with the haters.
Let's tackle translating in the head first because it is arguably the most exhausting hurdle for intermediate learners. We've all been there.
Oh yeah, it's terrible.
It's that mental gymnastics routine where you hear an English sentence, you quickly convert it into your native language to understand it, you formulate your response in your native language, convert that response back into English, and then finally you speak.
It takes forever. And by the time you open your mouth, the conversation has already moved on.
Completely.
The creator of the method uses this amazing metaphor of learning to kitesurf to explain this phase. Think about what it takes to kitesurf.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
When you are a total beginner standing on the beach, you are hyper-analyzing every single tiny variable. You are thinking, bend my knees exactly 15 degrees, control the tension on the left line of the kite, watch the wind direction, shift my weight to my back heel.
That sounds overwhelming.
It is. Your brain is consciously trying to process 50 different variables at the exact same time. And what happens? You constantly, violently crash into the water.
And that crashing is incredibly frustrating. But it is a necessary neurological mechanism. You have to go through the pain of thinking to build the pathways.
Right.
But eventually, after enough hours of crashing and getting back up, a miraculous shift happens. You stop thinking about your back heel. You stop staring at the kite lines. You just feel the wind on your face. Your body reacts automatically to the pull, and you ride the wave.
It is the exact same mechanism with language. Going through that clumsy, slow translation phase isn't a sign that you are failing. It is just a mandatory part of the process before the feeling takes over.
It's a phase you just have to endure.
The source material assures learners that if they just keep putting in the massive speaking hours during those jam sessions, the translation habit will eventually die on its own.
You simply will not have the time or the mental bandwidth to translate 50 variables anymore.
Exactly. And your brain will adapt to thinking directly in English out of pure evolutionary necessity.
But that brings us to the second roadblock, the fear of the crash itself,
Yeah.
or more specifically, the fear of who is watching you crash.
The haters.
Yes. The transcripts directly address learners who say, I am terrified to speak because people laugh at my English.
The creator's response to this is one of those clarifying things I've ever read. They point out that if people are mocking your English or laughing at your mistakes, you need to look very closely at who is doing the laughing.
It's so true.
Almost universally, it is insecure, non-native speakers who are trying to make themselves feel superior.
It is such a vital, liberating observation. Confident native speakers simply do not care about your grammatical mistakes or your slightly unusual accent.
Why would they? They already possess the language. They are not threatened by someone else in the process of acquiring it.
Exactly. If a native speaker does not understand you, they are not judging your intelligence. They are simply experiencing a lack of clarity. They will just ask you to repeat yourself. It is a functional issue, not a moral judgment.
Realizing that is like taking a heavy backpack off after a long hike. It forces you to critically evaluate whose opinions you are actually letting into your head. If a critic is insecure enough to laugh at someone learning a second language, their laughter speaks volumes about their own internal anxiety and absolutely nothing about your progress, your intelligence, or your worth.
It requires an essential shift in mindset for you, the listener. You have to actively grant yourself the psychological safety to make mistakes.
You have to give yourself permission to be bad at it first.
Yes. If you walk into a conversation constantly bracing for criticism, your brain will stay locked in that fearful analytical state we've been trying to escape. You will never be able to reach that intuitive kite-surfing flow state if you are terrified of the water.
The mindset shift is massive, and while we've focused heavily on speaking and listening, the source material pivots in the final section to give us an incredible hack for writing.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
What is truly amazing is how perfectly this intuitive, flow-first speaking philosophy translates to how we should approach writing in a foreign language. They outline a highly specific, four-draft executive function hack.
It translates so well because it mirrors the spoken philosophy beautifully. It completely separates the act of creation from the act of editing.
Because doing both is impossible.
Yeah, when we try to do both at the same time, we completely overload our brain. So the method breaks it down. In draft one, the only rule is to write as fast as humanly possible.
Just a total brain dump.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do not analyze the grammar. Do not check your spelling. Do not even worry if the sentences make logical sense. You are just dumping the raw ideas out of your head and onto the screen.
It's pure flow.
Huh.
You are just throwing the wet clay onto the potter's wheel. There is no shape yet, just mass.
Yes. Then you step away and you come back for draft two. Now you start to reorganize the flow. You might move entire paragraphs around. You try to improve the overall clarity and the structure of your argument.
You are starting to shape the clay, but you are still intentionally ignoring the microscopic details.
Right. No spell check yet.
Then comes draft three. This is where you finally take off your creator hat and put on your editor hat. Now you do the technical spell check. Now you look at the grammar rules you learned.
You finally get to use your prefrontal cortex.
Right. You use your computer's tools, Grammarly, spell check, whatever, to catch the mechanical errors and polish the surface.
And finally, draft four. Now, draft four is reserved only for highly important items. We are talking about a cover letter for a dream job, a university application, or a crucial business proposal.
High-stakes stuff.
Exactly. For this draft, you have a native speaker check your work. But the source material makes a very specific and deeply insightful distinction. You need a native speaker who is actually good at writing.
Which is such a valid point.
As they bluntly point out, just because someone is a native speaker does not mean they have any idea how to write well.
It's so true. I know plenty of native English speakers who couldn't write a compelling, well-structured paragraph to save their lives. But what I find so brilliant about this four-step process is how it solves the psychological paralysis of writer's block.
This raises an important question. How often do we paralyze ourselves in our daily lives by trying to be the creator and the editor at the exact same millisecond?
Oh, all the time.
Think about sitting at your computer on a Tuesday morning. You type a sentence. You immediately delete half of it because you aren't sure about the vocabulary word. You check a grammar rule. You type 3 more words. You doubt yourself again, and you delete the whole thing.
It is an agonizing, frictionless way to work. It's like trying to drive a car with one foot slamming the gas pedal and the other foot slamming the brake. You burn out the engine and you go nowhere.
Exactly.
By giving yourself explicit permission to write a terrible, messy, wildly incorrect, fast first draft, you completely liberate your workflow. You let the ideas flow first and you apply the rules later.
It is the exact same philosophy as the massive listening and delayed speaking. You let the subconscious mind do the heavy lifting of creation, and you only invite the analytical mind in at the very end to clean up the edges.
It all connects so beautifully. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's synthesize exactly what we've uncovered today. The path to true, effortless fluency is not paved with grammar textbooks, conjugation tables, and red pens.
Nope.
It's about learning intuitively through point-of-view stories. It's about being patient and bathing your brain in massive imprint. 4 or 5 hours a day of listening until your internal reservoir naturally overflows.
And when you are finally ready to step onto the stage and speak, you prioritize the music and intonation of the language over having perfect individual sounds.
Right. You accept the messy jazz jam session of real conversation over the sterile sheet music of classroom drills.
You also have to fiercely protect your mindset. You have to actively ignore the insecure critics, realizing that confident native speakers are just looking to communicate with you, not to judge you.
You have to accept the crashing phase of kite surfing as a necessary step to feeling the wind.
And whether you are speaking or writing an important email, you must separate your creative flow from your inner editor. Give yourself permission to be messy in the beginning.
I want to remind you right now that every single hour you spend listening is a direct deposit into your fluency account. Even just listening to this deep dive while you walk the dog, fold the laundry, or sit on the train, you are actively doing the work.
You are. You are building that subconscious feeling for correctness.
Keep that confluent mindset strong, where words flow and confidence grows.
And as we leave you today, I want you to consider one final thought based on everything we've discussed. We've talked so much about the mechanics of acquiring English, but if language is ultimately just a vehicle for human connection, how much of your perceived language barrier is actually just a connection barrier? If you drop the fear of being judged and you focus entirely on genuinely knowing the fascinating person standing in front of you, the words might just find themselves.